session last week, we went over the scriptural and philosophical basis for mind powers by looking at Shiva Sutras chapter 2, or Anika Light 2, light number 2 as they're called traditionally. We looked at the basis, the very first verse. Who remembers? I only said it about 500 times during that hour. Chitam mantraha, right? I meant what? The basis of our own consciousness, which is the whole universe, we are the whole universe, has a vibrational quality to it, an energy to it, which we would call mantra. And the verses relate that later to the deity's body, also to your light body, the different aspects of vibrational being that we are. Yeah? Like the first chapter of Shiva Sutras goes directly to it. Chaitanyam Atma Gyanam Bandhaha, first and second verses that go together, sandwiched, verse 1 and 2. Verse 1, Chaitanyam Atma, you are all that. Okay, if I read that and I get it from my guru, it's like, oh, well, I'm done. I'm enlightened. But if that's too difficult, then I go to the next verse. Gyanam Bandhaha. As soon as my mind, Jnanam, knowing, as soon as the knowing faculty is seeking knowledge and objects and grabbing onto them, I'm immediately separating myself from all experience through that process. That's Bandhaha, bondage. So, knowing, the process of knowing can create bondage if we identify with the process. Agyanam Bandhaha, another reading on it, is also not knowing your essential nature creates bondage. So if I don't have the aptitude for that first level of practice, using my essence mind directly, then I might use my mind, my small mind, chapter 2. Chitang mantraha. Are we okay?
Your mic's falling off.
Where did my mic go? Did you all miss all that?
No.
You didn't in the room, but maybe they did overseas. I don't know if you heard all that.
No, I heard it for sure.
Okay.
Just give me a quick sound check.
How's that clip better? Don't fall off. Might have been Raiden and me playing, huh? Okay. Sound check good? So, in the second chapter, we're dealing with most of us. The lower aptitude of student who doesn't have one exposure to Shaktipata through meeting a great guru or hearing a scripture and have ultimate reality just dawn within us. That's very difficult. Some people have that. I wasn't that lucky. So I had to work hard. So in the second chapter, we also see the effort, striving effort towards placing your mind continually into source. That is the greatest and most efficient, most important effort which a yogini or yogi can apply. So the chapter 2 says, look, if you don't get it right away, the most important thing you can do is keep putting your mind into source, over and over and over until it finally connects to source and you become source. That's a philosophically large way to put it. Then we need the practical techniques. What are the steps? What are the practical steps that allow this to happen? So that's the nature of today's talk, the 5 mind powers. So we want to go through in Tantra here. Mind power is something that is, it sounds kind of corny. It sounds like a 70s seminar when I say mind powers. To me it does anyway, because that was really big in the 70s. And I took those courses, and some were good actually. But mind power is something that is extremely important, because in the way that we come into the world, in the way that humans come into the world and create the world, you come through the mind. The mind is the energy. We always talk about them as 3 separate components, body, mind, and energy or speech, but really they're all the same. But our mind is the quickest moving. Our mind is the one that can change ourselves so quickly. It affects the energy in this way, the energy expression, then eventually the physicality of the body, then eventually the whole world around us. We create our world through the mind, really, and then everything flows from there. So our mind is extremely important, right? I was just put out research, or did we Facebook the research on the hedonistic approach versus the eudaimonic approach towards happiness and how it affects the health?
Not yet. It will be today.
So Kaleshri in Brazil found wonderful research that was in a New York Times article, which we're Facebooking probably today, that shows that if you seek pleasure for yourself, if your mind is seeking pleasure for yourself and happiness for yourself, it actually produces, is amazingly, for everybody, inflammation, subclinical inflammation, and suppresses your immune system. And you have other kind of negative effects. Whereas if, that's called hedonistic pleasure, right? If you seek eudaimonic pleasure, I learned a new word, it's really cool, eudaimonic pleasure. So happiness that's derived from helping others. Guess what? Immune system markers go up, the inflammation goes down. Even more importantly, the genetics, your genes operate differently. We know that the genes, everybody has genes for good and bad health, good and bad personality traits, right? We talked about this once before on camera. I think it's worth mentioning again in Mind Powers. Your genes don't dictate your destiny. Can we get this really straight once and for all? Scientifically proven. I see articles, I see tons of information out there all the time saying, this gene dictates this. This person is guaranteed to get this disease. This person is guaranteed to have this personality trait. That is incontrovertibly wrong in the science of genetics. It has been proven wrong since the 60s, but people love to run with that stuff. So what then does predict the outcome of your physical health and mental health through the genes? There are different chemicals that dictate what can be expressed through the genetic material or not, how it will be expressed. That's the key. How do those chemicals get produced? By the environment that's created through the mind. A positive mind, a loving mind, a compassionate mind, energy that comes from the heart essence and thinks always about the benefit of all together, happiness of us all together. That's what changes the way your genes function. This is scientifically proven now. Our whole Dharma practice and way of life is scientifically proven to make you healthier at the very least. So, of course, happier, we think too. Those studies are coming as well, right? So, mind powers is extremely important because your mind creates your reality even at a genetic level. And of course, creates everything around you. Isn't it true? So when you see, how it creates everything around you, you can see in architectural designs, let's say, a land developer who's thinking about money. They make crappy looking buildings, cram everybody into these little boxes. That's their mind and that's what comes out in creation. When you see a beautiful home or settlement or something or a building, even if it's a hospital or a library or whatever, developed by somebody with a sense of ease within themselves, a sense of connection to their source, it flows along the lines of Vastu Shastra, very naturally. It looks very beautiful. And the people that are hosted in that building experience an opening into their essence much easier. Yeah? So the mind is extremely important. In the Siddha School curricula, we're developing this school. Most of you know about our school, and thank you for donating. In the Siddha School development in the curricula, meditation has become a very important aspect of the scaffolding development from kindergarten, preschool, all the way through in the curricula. I'm working very hard to try to give actual ways that children can meditate all the way into teens and early adulthood, 15, 16 years old. How you start with children, so any of you have children out there in the world right now listening, you want to start with children meditating, getting mind powers through this first one, concentration. So concentration is usually the first mind power we approach in classical tantric meditation. Whole schools have been created on concentration. Whole paths like Vipassana, and Vipassana is a technique of Theravadan Buddhism and yoga as well. It predates Buddhism to be able to concentrate, of course. And formally teaching that in meditation predates Buddhism, of course. But Theravadan Buddhism, or Hinayana, however you know the term, has focused on it and created a whole path out of it. So it's obviously very important. Although it might be a bit short-sighted to only focus on one technique through the whole path. So concentration is very important. Children cannot sit down and concentrate for long periods of time. We can't either. They can concentrate on tasks that are interested in for long periods of time. And this is how we should begin to teach children meditation, mind powers through concentration. It's best if we give them something physical. So here we give the kids a breathing practice that involves movement of the hands in motion with inhale, exhale. Movement of the body, very simple motions of the body with inhaling and exhaling. Okay? And they get to chant. So once they learn how to do that with breathing, then they can make a sound with each movement. So here we get body, speech, and mind coming together, all together for children. It's short, it's 16 movements, it's really fun for them. It's related to mythology, so we relate it to the different gods and goddesses and so on. So their mind gets activated, their imaginative quality gets activated a lot too. This is how we develop concentration in children. Then it should be scaffolded, as I said, or in a ladder progression increased as you get older. So let's look at these 5 mind powers. We know the mind is absolutely crucial in developing our body as expression of physicality, our outer world, our inner state of happiness, our emotional balance, etc. So let's really look at why these mind powers are important to cultivate. Okay? First one, concentration. A lot could be said about concentration. There are many spiritual paths that only know that as the main meditation, as a form meditation. We have formless meditation over here, and we have form meditation over here. If you want to come and do a retreat in top-level instructions in formless meditation, we run the 8 gate retreats every year here in Thailand. So the 8 astrological times in the world where things just open up into the formless, we run a 7-day training around those time frames. Look them up on the schedule. Now today we're talking about the form meditations. Form meditations usually form the basis for higher expansion into something like formless meditation. Concentration being the most important first step of that. If we don't have an understanding of form meditation, where we use our mind actively, like Vipassana and other things like this, Trataka and so on. Trataka is concentration in Hatha Yoga, right? If we don't have that, we really will have a difficult time identifying formless. When someone attempts to go into formless right away, this is the problem I find when I used to teach at Zendos and different groups where they would do formless meditation as the first technique they would learn. One of the problems they would have constantly is they would think they're in what they're supposed to be in for the state. And unfortunately, many of the teachers, especially in the Vipassana type school and Zen, to pick out those two, because I had a lot of experience with them giving this type of instruction, they would say, oh, whatever you're asking me about, the content of your mind, don't worry about it. Just go back and do your practice. And that is like the sum and substance of meditation instruction for most Zendos and for most Vipassana groups. And people often find that not enough, not enough to really understand what's going on. In Zen, you're not supposed to be concentrating. In Vipassana, you are supposed to be concentrating, but in a different way. So people don't get really clear instruction. It's very good and very important to start with levels of concentration very slowly. And your teacher should take you through these levels of concentration very slowly until concentration is handled. Then you should go to the next level of practices where concentration becomes a skill within the form meditations, right? If we can't concentrate, all the other form meditations like Kriya Yoga or visualizing deities or mantra japa, our mind will wander. And if our mind wanders, we can't use anything, right? So it is the most foundational, but it shouldn't become the whole path. In fact, one teacher I was talking to made a good point, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago, we were chatting and said, I don't know why everybody's focusing on concentration so much. As a normal American person growing up, or any other culture where you have modern conveniences like cars and things, you have to concentrate a lot just to drive down the road and not kill somebody. Right? It's going on unconsciously. We have unconscious competence in a lot of concentration. But the truth is, most of us can concentrate pretty well because of the way we work in our jobs and so on. It's a matter of becoming consciously competent with concentration. So in the way of developing mind powers, we have to say that concentration is the bedrock of developing mind powers. Trance meditation is a type of meditation that's useful for humans, but without concentration, it'll just basically turn your spiritual experience into more of like a dream-like relaxation. You couldn't really call it meditation at that point when you do trance. Trance is imagination meditation, visualizing other realms, visualizing deities. Even Kriya Yoga is to a degree trance, unless you're grounding it in the physicality. So it's all based on good concentration to keep you connected and consciously competent. So let's discuss this concentration. Really, the very first thing is when you learn Hatha Yoga, you learn concentration, you learn Trataka. Your eyes should be focused upon a candle flame or an Om symbol and just look at it and don't move. So first we don't move the eyes and we don't move the mind. Helping your mind stay on the object with concentration, you link your breath to the object. Imagine if I look at this dot on the floor, if I'm using that for concentration, and I link my breath with it. As if my breath is flowing to the object and back. It's dynamic. But there's nothing but myself as the concentrator, the object as the concentrated, and concentrating. And that concentrating action happens through the breath in and out, piercing the object. So for people who wander a lot with their mind, I say, pierce the object with the breath. So your mind will flow along with the breath, back and forth between you and the object, and start to create a cohesion, which is nice as well, but at least you'll have this concentration, right? When that's developed unbroken, when your mind doesn't move for about 5 minutes, most of my teachers said, then you've accomplished that level. You really don't need that anymore. Now you can bring that skill, it's not a path, it's only a little technique, you can bring that skill into the greater path. Does that make sense? Of course, you have to have enough self-awareness to know whether your mind has wandered or not in the 5 minutes, right? So, first level concentration, trataka. Concentration on an external object. Many of you know the 4 levels of tantric meditation practice. What do we call them? What's the first one?
External object.
Eyes open, external object. Right? Eyes open. So this is the eyes open, external object level of concentration. There's 4 levels, right? Of meditation in the form meditations. This is in classical mind training, right? The 4 levels of classical mind training in Tantra. Eyes open, external object. So as we focus on the external object with our eyes open, when that becomes stabilized, we can move to a next level of that. Okay? We can move it to the 1 to 10 count, which many of you know. 1 to 10 count. Again, I'm meditating and I'm looking at that, I'm using form meditation, I'm looking at the object on the floor or the wall ahead of me, an Om sign, a candle flame, whatever, and I'm just breathing and I'm counting. So I keep my eyes on that object and I breathe in. Tongue is softly on the roof of the mouth and I breathe out. Now when I breathe in, I count 1. When I breathe out, I count 1. My next breath, I count 2. 2, out, right? Next breath, counting 3. Out, 3. And the mind doesn't move, you're just in concentration. If you lose the count, oh yeah, back 3, that's right, 3, that means you left. So you start over again at 1. If you lose the visual, oh, I'm not even thinking about what I'm looking at anymore. My eyes are open, I'm looking at this object, but I have all these other things going on, like what I need to buy at the grocery store. Then you come back again to the count at 1 and re-establish the visual connection and start the breath again. When you go 1 to 10 very easily, that's a nice accomplishment. It can take a few weeks for some people, most people. And if it takes months or years, it doesn't matter. It's worthy to do. And don't try too hard. Just let it happen kind of naturally. This would be like a next level exercise of concentration, right? Could be, right? We can also go another way, where our meditation takes a physical form. So some of you know Stav, the martial art that we teach in the system here. I learned from Ivar Hofschold. That is very meditative. You all start with a stick that stands on the ground up to your armpit, and we learn how to manipulate the stick in various motions with our breath and with our movement. And we know that when we're concentrating well, the stick flows in the right pattern. When we're not concentrating well, it gets kind of wonky. Yeah? So this is another way to practice concentration at the basic external level. But by moving your body as well, it becomes much more complex. So it's easier to start like yogins do, seated with trataka. Now the idea in Hatha Yoga, which is Kundalini Yoga, Adi Yoga, is that if we are practicing correctly with trataka, that awakening of concentration is then brought into the asana practice. And we can stay concentrated on the asana. And we know that asana can grab all of our mind because the sensations can be rich if we practice it correctly. If we don't have disco music banging in the background and we're dancing around. There was a show I saw in America when I first got back to America from the real world. I couldn't believe it. In 1997, they had some guys and gals on TV every morning on a major national network like NBC doing vinyasa ashtanga-like stuff in little bra and panty kind of thing, you know, sexy stuff, on the floor in the studio before the news came on for a half-hour class. Anybody ever see this? And they would put like sort of like house music on, soft house, you know, and they would be bouncing in the postures and dancing. And the teacher would be like, yeah, that's right, feel that, bounce it, you know. It was nuts. It was nuts. It's the farthest thing from yoga you could actually imagine. So rather than that, if we had concentration in the postures and we were to absorb all the sensations being created using the awarenesses that we use in Adi Yoga, right? Awareness of your positional experience, awareness of the breath, awareness of the kumbhas, and so on. You would become very deeply entrenched and concentrated naturally in what you're doing. So these are the levels of concentration on this way. Of course, we can go to internal concentration with our own internal sensations and bindus and so forth.